What's up, everybody? Before I jumped in the car, the last thing I did was answer a comment in a thread from maybe the millionth woman that I've run into in the course of seeking the abolition of abortion, who claimed that abortion saved her life. And the story she gave was like the story I read or hear from hundreds of women. And it always goes like this. Abortion saved my life. I was experiencing a miscarriage, and I had to have the baby removed from my body to keep me from dying from infection. And then I ask, wait, did the baby die and then you had their body removed? And about 75% of the time, the woman will tell me, yes, it was an abortion. And I'll say, that's not the kind of abortion that we are trying to abolish. And she'll say, well, if you abolish abortion, you won't be able to do that. And I'm like, no, a baby who dies from a miscarriage and their body has to be removed via a DNC process, that is medical treatment of removing a child that's died. That is different from actively murdering a living child in a normal situation or in a precarious situation. In either case, if you totally abolished abortion as murder and it was a criminal act to actively kill a baby, removing the body of a baby who has died would not be a criminal act, would not be abolished, and is not murder. The baby has died. You can't, moving a dead body is not treated as murder in any situation. So I explain this. And here's how the conversation usually goes. All of a sudden, the woman gets in a huff and a puff, and then she repeats herself. She goes on loop. Well, abortion saved my life. And I'm like, well, no, actually, your baby died in abortion, the DNC kept you from being infected. And it goes on loop. And I always, when the loop starts happening, I always ask, now, are you saying, just for the sake of our conversation, are you saying that the only abortions that should be allowed are removals of babies that have died and bodies that would cause infection? Is that what you're saying? When you advocate for keeping abortion legal, are you advocating for only keeping a DNC process of removing a dead baby legal? Is that what you're advocating for? And then they go, no. They say, no, abortion should be legal for any reason whatsoever. At that point, I start to just wonder, okay, this person is disingenuous, they're lying, I have no idea whether they've had an abortion that was elective for no reason, or if they had a medical emergency, or if they, like millions of other people, are lying and appropriating somebody else's tragic loss, a loss that I've experienced and my wife has experienced, in order to justify what they did, which was a wicked, cruel, just straight on killing of a child in their womb. It's like, I'm pretty darn certain, like looking at the stats on this thing, that the number of women who've aborted living children is like 10 to 1 of the number of women who have had to remove a child via a DNC process who miscarried naturally but had to be removed. It's actually, it's not 10 to 1, it's like 100 to 1, or maybe even 1,000 to 1. So many more people are murdering living children than they are removing the remains of children who've died. And on top of that, even if the number, I'm not quoting exact numbers, even if the numbers were 1 to 1, why would anyone who lost a child, this is a tragic, the saddest thing that will ever happen to you. You lose a child, it's like a child that you and your husband are naming and talking about and looking forward to. You lose that child, and then you turn around and say, you know what, I'm going to take this loss and I'm going to argue that other women should purposely kill their babies. That's why I know it's disingenuous, because the women that I do know that have lost babies and have had to have the child's body removed via a D&C process, they're not usually advocates of abortion. They are usually people who are so sad and stricken with grief that they just can't even understand why somebody would purposefully miscarry a baby. Like, why would somebody purposely do a D&C on a living child? Like that process of removing a dead baby, why would anyone do that to a live baby, a living baby? Like, it's crazy. And so that's what really happens. And so I think sometimes people think you're being insensitive or you should listen and all this kind of stuff. But I'm sick of it. Like, I think that there are women running around all over our culture, and this is sad, but I think this is a reality. This is what my experience shows me. This is what the numbers show me. There's a great many women in our culture who are appropriating the tragic loss of this other group of women so that they can be as evil as possible. They actually want there to be tragic miscarriages and losses, and women who don't want to kill their babies losing their babies, so that they can use that story to justify their vile, murderous acts. And it needs to be talked about. And abolitionists do not need, and thankfully abolitionists don't, but abolitionists do not need to be sitting there listening to mothers who say, hey, I had a tragic miscarriage and had to remove the baby, therefore all abortion should be legal. You should not assume that woman actually had a miscarriage. You should assume that woman murdered her child, because any woman who actually lost a child without choosing to kill them would be arguing against abortion. That's what makes sense. Now, the only thing that might say, no, there's women who've lost children from miscarriage who argue for abortion. When you look into that, and I'm telling you, if you ever get a chance to look into it as frequently as I do, you will find that a lot of women who have had miscarriages and had to have the babies removed via D&C aborted babies prior to that baby. Like, they had an abortion, that abortion affected their womb, then they later had a miscarriage, probably as a result of that abortion, or possibly as a result of that abortion, and their womb has become an inhospitable place because of the murderous acts that have been carried out within it, and they are using their loss to justify their own murder. So they are women in that first category. There's women who actively murder their children, and then there are women who lose babies via natural miscarriage. The women who lose babies via natural miscarriage never argue for abortion and appropriate their own losses. Those women always say, you know what, I can't believe that someone would choose to do what I had to do because of my loss. I'm sick of it. We need to be very clear on this, and we do not need to give them any ground to argue from miscarriage to abortion.